Hi, my name's Louise and today we're going to go through dosing patients on Dawn AC. Now what you can see at the moment is I have a main patient screen open for Lucy Winters. I can see her main identifiers up at the top, so I can see I have the correct patient. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in an INR result for Lucy and we're going to go through some dosing. Now the INR gets entered on the dosing tab itself. Depending on whether you have an INR interface set up or not, the INR might already be there. If not, we'll need to manually enter that in. Now the Dawn AC system is very much a warnings based system. So if for example you put in a particularly high INR result or a particularly large dose change or a large next test interval, Dawn will pop up with warnings. And it will just flag up that it's a big change or a big interval and are you sure? And it's really just to make sure that what you're putting into Dawn is what you intend it to be. So you will see this as we're going through some of the dosing now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my INR result. I can see that the patient's scheduled in for today, so that's fine. I've got my INR here. I'm going to start off with an INR of 2.5. Once I've entered the INR result in, I can either hit enter on my keyboard or I can choose the accept INR option. And what you can see now is the INR has been entered in. Dawn can see that that INR is in range. It already has the target range over here on the left, so it knows what is an in range INR versus out of range. Dawn has then suggested a no dose change from last time and a 3-week next test interval. Now Dawn has used the inbuilt dosing algorithm to look back at the patient's history and make this decision in terms of the dose and next test. Now, if this was a stable patient, I was completely happy, I didn't need to make any changes, all I'd need to do at this point is hit accept dose. I could then go ahead and print out a dose letter, a dose label, etc. So the accept dose button is always going to be the final step in dosing a patient. Now obviously there are going to be times when you know something Dawn doesn't and you want to make a slight change to the dose and or the next test. So let's say that I want to make a slight change to the dose. I have a few options for changing the dose instruction itself. I can either pop in a different numerical value in here and hit enter. The D is actually signifying that this is a daily dose, so I can put in a different daily dose here and hit enter. Or possibly easier, we can use these up and down arrows to slightly increase the dose or slightly decrease it. So let's say we want to just increase the dose very slightly. At the moment we've got 4 milligrams every day. If I hit the up arrow once, it's now gone to 5 milligrams on Sunday for the rest of the week. And you can see that the Dawn is actually telling me that okay, this is a dose increase of 3% and it's changed the average daily dose. So again, if I hit the up arrow again, it's going to do exactly the same thing. It increases the dose by 1 increment. I've got 5 milligrams now on Sunday and Wednesday and for the rest. And again, Dawn's now telling me it's an increase of 7%. What I can also do is say that I'm happy with the dose, but I might want to change the pattern. So what I can do is actually double click anywhere on this instruction and it opens up the dosing instruction over here on the right as editable fields for each day. So what I could do is I could just free type in what I want the patient to take each day. Let's say in this scenario I want the 2 5 milligrams to be on consecutive days and then 4 milligrams for the rest. All I need to do is just type that in. So I've now got 5 milligrams on 2 consecutive days and 4 milligrams the rest. What I can also do over here on the right is I can change the first day of the week, because obviously at the moment it's Sunday, today it's Thursday. So if I hit Thursday, it now changes that first day of the week to be today's date. So once I'm happy with my dose, all I need to do is click on the little cross here just to come out of that, and you can see that the dose instruction itself is now updated here on the left. Now at this point, if I want to change the next appointment date, I can do that also. You can see it's telling me that Dawn's suggesting a 3-week next test interval. If I want to change the next appointment date, I can either free type a different date in, I can use the calendar icon to choose a different day, or what I can do is use some short codes such as, for example, plus 2W. And if I hit enter on that, Dawn then gives me a 2-weeker. So I can do, for example, plus 1W, plus 2W to give me a different interval. Now once I'm happy with my dose, I'm happy with my next test, the last thing that I might want to do before accepting this dose is actually enter in some treatment notes against this visit. So all I need to do is free type just underneath treatment notes. Okay, and I can enter in as much detail in there as I want to. Now, if this note is particularly important and I want it to be highlighted for the next user who's coming in to dose the patient, what I have is a little yellow exclamation mark just here at the top right. And if I click on the yellow exclamation mark, it actually highlights the whole note. Now, if I've changed my mind and I want to take that off, I just simply click on the little yellow exclamation mark again, and that comes off again for me. So again, once I'm happy, I've got my dose, I've got my next test, the last step is always going to be hitting accept dose. And what happens then is if I choose this option, Dawn then books the patient in for the next appointment. I can see today's record in history now, so I can see the INR, I can see the dose, I can see the dose instruction. I can hover my cursor over the eye and see both the full dose instruction and also the treatment note. And I can see at the top now that the patient's been booked in for the 27th of March. Up here I can see the scheduling details, so from 9 to 9:05, and there's space now for the next INR result to be entered. So I know that I'm finished when I have a space for the next INR and my next appointment on the dosing tab. Now let's move on to a slightly different patient now. So again, I can see the identifiers at the top, so we're now looking at Joy Winters. What you might notice is on her history tab, she has a slightly different dosing instruction display. And it's worth bearing in mind that within Dawn AC, you can have your dosing instructions displayed in different ways. So the last example we looked at a daily breakdown regime, which had a dose for each day of the week. This particular patient has a one-line text instruction. So if we were printing out, for example, a dose letter or a dose label, it would purely print out this one line instead. But the principles of the dosing are the same. Now this time we're going to put in an out-of-range INR result. Okay, and I'm going to put in, let's say, 4.8 for this one. Now, you can see I've got a warning. It's saying the INR is significantly different from the previous one. Again, this is quite useful for, say, if I put in an INR result of 20 instead of 2, I will get a warning. So it says, please correct the INR or click the red question mark to accept the current value. So when Dawn has a query against something, whether it's the INR result, whether it's the dose or the next test, Dawn will pop up a little red question mark beside the field it's querying. You can hover your cursor over the question mark to see what the query is. But if you're happy that this is the correct INR result or the correct dose, for example, all you need to do is click on the little red question mark, and that indicates to Dawn that what you've put in is correct, and it then carries on. Now what you can see here is the INR has gone in. There is a flag against that because it is a high INR. The screen is a little bit more colourful now because of the out of range result. So you can see over here on the right hand side we have a few warnings because of the out of range INR. So we have a dose change that Dawn suggested. It's suggesting that the INR is high, so check with patient, etc. And what Dawn has suggested in this instance is a dose decrease of 18%, a 7-day next test interval, but it's also suggested a miss 2 days instruction. Now these options are just free text fields. So again, this can be changed really easily. So if I thought, well, miss 2 days is a bit much, I just want the patient to miss the 1 day, all I need to do is just type over that as 1. If I didn't want a patient to miss any days of the dose and I just want them to have the dose decrease, what I can do is click on this little plus or minus button here, and that actually clears off the missed day instruction completely. So if I click on this button, it'll remove that one-off missed day instruction. Now when you're in the middle of dosing any patient, there's always an option to click on the plus or minus button. So if you wanted to enter in a one-off missed day instruction, or alternatively a one-off boost dose, if I click on the plus or minus button, I have the option to do that. So for example, obviously this isn't a high INR, so I wouldn't, but let's say that I could do, for example, 6 milligrams for 2 days as a one-off boost dose. Obviously in this case I wouldn't, so let's just keep it at miss 1 day. So I have a miss 1 day instruction. Again, I have my dosing instruction here, which is 4 and 5 milligrams alternate days. I can use the up and down arrows. So if I think, well, the decrease is a bit much, let's just up it a bit. And that's changed my dose instruction to the next increment up, which is 5 mg Monday to Friday for Saturday and Sunday. I can see that's now a decrease of 14% and my daily average has changed. I can also potentially double click on the instruction as I did before and put in an average daily dose instead, so give them a particular dose each day if I want to. And again, I can change the next appointment date if I'm not happy with that as well. So again, I can use a calendar icon or I can free type in there. Any treatment notes at this point I want to pop in, I can pop in this box. But again, the last step is always going to be clicking on accept dose. Now, the accept dose button, you might notice, is actually colour coded. If the accept dose button is green, it means that there have been no warnings against that particular visit. So the dose was hasn't had a big dose change, there wasn't a big interval, Dawn hasn't queried anything that you popped in, the accept dose button will be green. If it's amber, which is in this scenario, it means that there has been a warning. So there was a warning against something, and in this instance it was a warning against the INR result because it was high. The amber means that there has been a warning, but you've acknowledged it. So you've clicked on the question mark or you've corrected it, and we are good to go with it clicking on accept dose. Now, if the accept dose button is ever red, it means there is still a warning somewhere on that dosing screen that you have yet to acknowledge. So if you've given, let's say for example, the patient a big dose change and Dawn has a red question mark beside the dose, or a big interval, you might have a little red question mark somewhere on here that you haven't acknowledged. And until you acknowledge that warning and the accept dose button remains red, you're not going to be able to finish off that record. So this is amber, so it's all good. I can just click on accept dose on this one. And again, all that happens is Dawn books the patient in for the next appointment. Again, I can see the next appointment date is the 20th, and I've got my details at the top. And I can see today's record in here with the INR, the dose, and the little D to indicate the daily dose, and also the full dose instruction as well, which includes the missed day instruction. So we're going to move on to one final patient now, and we're going to look at Fiona here. Now again, patient identifies at the top, it's Fiona Winters. She has a next appointment date for today's date, and I'm going to put in an INR result for her again. Now let's imagine that the patient's had a particularly out of range INR and Dawn can't suggest a dose. The Dawn AC system by default won't suggest a dose if the INR is less than 1.3 or bigger than 5. It also won't suggest a dose if the patient has less than 2 previous INRs and 2 previous doses. So the system needs at least 2 previous records to be able to suggest a dose in the next test. So let's put in an INR of 6. Now again, I get a warning beside the INR result because it's a high one, so I'm going to acknowledge that warning by clicking on the red question mark. And what you can see here is I have no dose and no next test. And if I look over here on the right, I can see that I've got a warning that the last 3 INRs are all rising, and also that the dose calculation has been prevented because the INR is above 5. So at this point I need to make a manual decision. So I can have a look back at the history and make a decision from here, so I can see what the last dose was. So let's put something in here. Okay, so what you can see is we have a dose of 3 mg daily. I can see that that's a decrease of 16%. Because the INR result is a high one, is 6, I might want to give a one-off missed day instruction as we did in the last one. So I've got the plus or minus button to do that. So what I can do is say, let's say miss 2 days for example. So I have my miss instruction at the top, I have my dose which I've decided on. Again, Dawn hasn't been able to suggest a next appointment date either. So let's pick a different day for them to come back. And then again though, once we've got our dose, we've got our next appointment date, the last thing remains for us to click on accept dose. And again, once we've done that, you can see today's record in history. At this point I might want to go to letters tab and print out a dose letter or a dose label, but this patient has now been dosed for today.